Welcome to the third installment of Compelling Conversations. Hello, everyone out there. This is Steve Ramerini. I am the founder and CEO of Compel CEOs, and it's a privilege and an honor to be coming to you from the Brightech Studios today with our guest, Sam Goodwin. Sam is an American entrepreneur and public speaker. He travels around and speaks to groups such as the United States military, faith-based groups. He speaks at corporate conventions, and he also speaks to elite athletes, as he himself was a Division I college hockey player. Throughout his career, he co-founded a tech company, an NGO, in Singapore, and he holds the distinction of being one of only about 100 people in the world who has traveled to all 193 nations that are recognized as sovereignties by the United Nations. He has an undergraduate degree from Niagara University and also a master's from Washington University in St. Louis, where he's from originally. And now he lives in D.C. as he is pursuing a doctorate in advanced international studies from Johns Hopkins School. So, Sam, welcome. It's great to have you with us. And you have another very interesting distinction in that for about 60 or so days during one of your trips, you were imprisoned in Syria on false charges of espionage. So can you tell us what that was like?
Sure. Thanks, Steve, for having me. It's great to be here. Thanks for the introduction. In the summer of 2019, as part of my journey to travel to every country in the world, I was in Syria. I was wrongfully detained, accused of espionage, of collaborating with terrorists. I was held for 9 weeks for 63 days. And thank God, thanks to a long list of people who worked tirelessly, that ended peacefully. And since then, I have really been working to reflect and put things into context and perspective and figure out ways that I can potentially use some of the things that I learned through this experience to help others.
So I know that you mentioned during your presentation about using uncertainty as a tool. I think your line was, never waste uncertainty. And it's interesting because over the last few months, I think that is the perfect word to describe the situation that we're in. We work with business owners all the time, and the word that they keep on saying is the future's uncertain. There's uncertainty out there. No one knows what's going to happen next, whether it be recession or not, more increases with the Fed. So I think this is a very timely presentation. What do you hope to bring to your audiences by speaking to them about the uncertainty, using your own experience for those 63 days?
So during that time, I was pushed to a point of overwhelming uncertainty, truly life or death, as I believed. And through that, I learned some things that going forward have helped me, and some things that I believe can help others as well as they embrace and manage uncertainty in their own personal and professional lives. My presentations are narrative driven and include all of the dramatic elements of my stories, from being an athlete to starting a company in Singapore to traveling every country. And of course, around this experience in the summer of 2019. But it also concludes and is really focused around three key takeaways that I've found were most important to me in that situation, and three things that I think the same three things can also be helpful to others. I talk a lot about gratitude. I think channeling gratitude is the price of admission to even be able to consider doing the next two things, and it puts everything in perspective. Second thing is around taking action and controlling what we can control. And the third is around recognizing the opportunity for growth through our challenges and through the uncertain times that we face. And these three things, when I reflect back on my situation and my isolation, were paramount to helping me. And I believe that they're also very transferable to business, to our professional lives, to our personal lives, or when we're facing our biggest challenges or at our lowest point. And it's been a real challenge, but also a privilege to be able to pull as best I can the messages and the things that I learned through this experience to try to help other people today.
So you speak to a very diverse group: corporations, got corporate conventions, elite level athletes, faith-based groups. Tell me, what do you think each of those groups takes away from your talks and presentations?
So I do tailor my presentations for every audience, and I'm here this week, honored to be here with Compel this week to talk to business leaders and CEOs in this region, and talk primarily on uncertainty and how I think what I learned can be relevant for business leaders and embracing uncertain times in the workplace. I do speak quite a bit in faith-based settings. I'm a devout Catholic, and my faith was very important to me through this experience. There were a lot of places that I went to for strength through this situation, but my faith was very important. And all of my presentations are narrative driven and include the dramatic elements of my stories, but depending on the audience, I'll pull out certain messages depending on what is most relevant. And I enjoy the faith-based settings because that was something that was very important to me and to my family as they worked to make sense of everything and find a resolution. I also will speak quite a bit to athletes. I grew up as a competitive hockey player, and I've found that many of the skills and traits that I developed as a competitive athlete throughout my entire life helped me in business. They help when starting a company. They've helped me in my personal life when it comes to overcoming those challenges. And they've also helped me when I've been at my lowest points. And I think that we hear a lot. For example, we hear CEOs talk about how they like to hire athletes because of these different traits that they develop, from mental toughness, critical thinking, resilience, performance under pressure, teamwork, being able to deal with being told no. And so these things I found to be relevant in business, but they were also things that I leaned on through these experiences and others. And so to answer your question, I pull different messages out for different groups, but ultimately I hope that people leave with a renewed inspiration that the best days are to come, and that we're all stronger and more resilient than we can imagine. And I'm nothing special. I just found a strength inside of me that we all have within ourselves.
Well, that's a great message to hear. And I need to do a shout out here because we actually met because of one of your presentations to a faith-based group. I got an email from a friend for many years, Glenn Bomer, and he
Shout out to Glenn.
Shout out to Glenn. And he basically said, drop everything and don't book anybody else until you book Sam to come in and speak to your group. So thank you, Glenn. I have to say that when you posted a slide of the reunion you had with your parents, I mean, that was, for me, it was a very emotional point. And you know, seeing you there, it was very difficult to imagine that you had spent 63, 65 days in a cell that was, 8 by 8 with no windows, no light, no talking, no contact. It was just you and your thoughts. I mean, besides thinking about what you were grateful for, and what did you draw on from the athletic experience that you had as a Division I athlete that helped you get through that point?
One of the things that I say to people when they ask about that particular moment is that if this story was ever a movie or adapted for something on screen, nothing in that moment would need to be dramatized. It could be played out exactly the way it was. And it was overwhelmingly emotional, a moment that many people thought would never happen, a breathtaking display of God answering prayers. And I think back on that moment, and there are a lot of emotions that stir within me, and I was drawing on all kinds of sources for strength during that time, and to this day remain really openly in awe of the way that everything played out. And it's almost 4 years later, and it's been overwhelming for me to learn about all the people who were involved and work to make this happen, none of which I knew about during that time. And so I think that there's a message here around we don't always see everything that's happening. I think it's always important to really gather information and try to better understand before we act. I think it's relevant in athletics or business or whatever it might be, and that was really the case when this happened.
So I could see the benefits clearly to all of the various constituencies that you speak to, whether it be the military or the elite athletes, the corporate leaders, in faith-based settings and whatnot. Is the reaction different from each of those groups, and what is it that they hone in on?
Yeah, the Q&A sessions are really all over the place. It's a mixed bag, and oftentimes I'll get questions about my family. I'll get geopolitical questions. I'll get resilience or adversity questions. I'll get government questions. I'll get business questions. It's kind of a range and a mixed bag. I'll get questions about my family, about roommates, stuff, about all kinds of different, about hockey. I was in captivity when the Blues won the Stanley Cup, so there was a sports element to the story as well. And so the Q&As are really all over the place, and it's often sometimes kind of difficult to remember what all the questions were because they're coming from all different places.
Yeah, I know that you probably only found out after you were released that the Blues won the Stanley Cup, but I'm pretty certain that the captain of the Blues is now on the Vegas Golden Knights, and they're up 2-0 in the Stanley Cup final. So maybe you got someone to root for this time.
Yeah, Petrangelo's out there, and they won last night. They had a pretty big win last night. But yeah, the Blues did win, and it's interesting when this all was happening, in no way was the Blues or hockey a top priority or anything. That I was much more concerned with staying alive and the well-being of my family and when I might be released or not released. But there was also a very important element to staying connected to the outside and maintaining psychologically in tune by staying connected. So I did think about that. That was one of the things that I used in order to stay connected. I knew they were playing in the finals. I knew that it was the first time in franchise history that they might win a cup. And so it was one of the places that I did go to for a little bit of strength to stay emotionally in tune. And then I learned later that they did end up winning. And actually today, if I'm home in St. Louis or anywhere and I see someone with a 2019 Blues Stanley Cup champions hat or T-shirt or flag or something like that, it's a real reminder. It's very humbling of where I was during that time, and I think it's important for all of us to use our biggest challenges and the obstacles that we've overcome as strength moving forward, and that's what I try to do with that.
Well, from listening to you, it does sound like you drew upon everything you had experienced, everything that you could think of, and in the face of loneliness and the what ifs, what if I never get out, what if they decide today's the day that they no longer need me, whatever. That is a daunting task to keep focused on being positive going forward, and I loved your line about never waste uncertainty, because it does give you an opportunity to look at all the possibilities. How did you come up with that? To look at everything that you could be grateful for, to be prepared for anything that might come your way, just to be prepared for whatever was the next challenge they were going to throw at you.
I think some of this I had going into this experience, from my faith to being an athlete to good parenting, which I'm so humbled and grateful to say I had that. But a lot of it has also been some very intense reflection and putting things into perspective and context. In fact, a couple of months after I came home, a COVID hit. And so for me, it was kind of isolation 2.0. And it was a very frustrating time because I thought I was ready to go and share these messages and ready to impact people. But instead I had to just sit and wait. There were no events. There was nothing happening. And looking back, I've found that to be very much a blessing in disguise, because it gave me more time to think about these things. How did I embrace and manage uncertainty? How did I work through that? And more importantly, how can that be useful to someone else? How can that be helpful? So it was a lot of reflection, a lot of taking the time to put things into context and perspective, a lot of work finding the right words, the way to share this. And it's by no means finished. I think it's something that will be a work in progress forever. I think I'll be working on it and thinking about it, and my perspective on it will always be changing. And frankly, I think it would be weird if it wasn't changing. So I have put a lot of work and time and energy into it, and that's been fueled by a desire to pay this forward and help others. And I think some of those came before, and a lot of it has come after. It's been a kind of a combination on that front.
So you mentioned something that I think is critically important, and it played a vital role in getting released, and that's your family. So not just growing up, but their belief and faith and trying to find a way to get you, and then the involvement of your sister in who she reached out to. She could have reached out to anybody, and she probably didn't know she was reaching out to the right person when she reached out to this individual. But it was, a lot of it has to do with your family, which is just, in my mind, can't stress that enough. The importance of a good, grounded family life.
Yeah, no doubt. My family is a normal, average family from middle America. They had no idea what to do when their loved one went missing in the Middle East, but thankfully they began to act and started putting things in motion, and it ended up resolving as a result of a family connection. And there are some people in the U.S. government who have basically said that they hadn't really seen a family kind of rally in that way, and so yeah, I at that point I wasn't very helpful. I can't take any credit for their efforts because I wasn't part of that, but it speaks to the resilience, and I'm happy to be here with them.
And the thing also that's incredible is you took a situation where clearly you were a victim, and you flipped it into, if I can, how am I going to conquer this? I can be a victim or I can be a conqueror, and you clearly have conquered it. And I know you spoke a little bit about, the aftermath. There's been a little bit of, PTSD, but you turned that around too, and you spoke about PTG, which is post-traumatic growth, which I think is an incredible thing. Can you speak to that just a bit?
Sure. I could play the victim card for the rest of my life with this situation if I wanted to, and that is just not what I want to do. It was never a consideration to do that, and I think that if we are honest with ourselves, I think we will say that our personality today, the very essence of our life, is a result of the challenges we've faced and the choices we've made as a result of those challenges, not because of the good times that we've had. I often say that we could be held hostage by anything. alcohol, drugs, illness, relationships, finances, or God forbid, an oppressive Middle Eastern regime. And for many of us, at some point in our life, we'll probably feel that way. But the way that we embrace and manage those challenges, the actions we take, I think that defines who we become. And that has been the fuel to keep me moving in the direction of flipping this, as you said. And I don't know that I've totally conquered it yet by any means. I think I have a lot of work to do, but that is what I'm committed to. That's the track that I'm committed to focusing on.
So I know one of the things you mentioned, which I found to be an incredible tool, is at the darkest time, you said, okay, there's 8 billion people in the world. Where do I rank? I'm certainly not the 8th billionth. I have so much to be thankful for and to consider. And you mentioned gratitude, but I think that was an incredible tool to, just to get you back to reality.
I think gratitude is the most important and underrated virtue in the world. The problem, or the challenge that I think a lot of people have with gratitude, is they lack perspective. And I've tried to get people, by using my experience and my stories through travel, through different things, to try and get people to practice reframing their perspective, especially when facing uncertainty. And there are over 1 billion people in the world who struggle or lack access to clean water, for example. And people are here complaining that they're stuck in traffic or that their Instagram's not growing or whatever it is. I mean, give me a break. And I think that if I use that example today in my presentation about the list and where do I rank, and I think that perspective is so important. And if with gratitude, being content and grateful for what we have, and not envious for what we don't have, while still being ambitious, because we can't become complacent. If we channel that too much and say, well, I'm just gonna be grateful for how things are, and if bad things happen, I'm just not gonna deal with them, I'm just gonna be grateful, then there's a lack of ambition there. But I think when we are grateful for what we have and not envious for what we don't have, while still being ambitious, that is a different way to think about being satisfied.
Great, thank you. And I know you also said, and this I find incredibly interesting, was, obviously you were eating bread and potatoes twice a day with a little bit of water. So your body was not getting nourished. Your body was shutting down, but yet your mind, because of the way you approach things, was continuing to grow. That's an incredible tool, I guess, if you want to call it that.
In that situation, after channeling some strength from the gratitude exercise, I didn't want to then just sit around and do nothing, despite being in an 8x8 cell. I wanted to take action and control what I could control. There were so many things that I couldn't control: when I'd be released, whether they finally figured out I wasn't a spy. But there were lots of things I could control. I can control my thoughts, my attitude, my prayers. I could control my exercise. I did push-ups, sit-ups, core exercises. I could control how much water I drank, when I went to sleep at night. And my goal wasn't to get rid of negative thoughts and feelings. My goal was to change the way I responded to them. And through that, that's where I found that my body in that situation was shutting down. But through that shift in perspective and mindset, my mind was getting sharper.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, what's the one universal message that you have for all of the audiences that you speak to?
I think we're all stronger and more resilient than we can imagine, and uncertain times are exactly what we need in order to grow.
That's terrific. And as I said at the onset, this is a very uncertain time for a lot of people. So, Sam, thank you so much for being with us. Continued success as you go through your journey here. And I can't wait for the rest of the week to see how the other groups respond to you. So God bless you, Sam, and I'm glad you're with us.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Take care.